because you are a strong advocate for community-centric fundraising. And for listeners who may be new to this concept, can you explain what it is and how it looks different in practice from traditional donor-centric fundraising models?
Sure. I feel like I've really nailed this example because I used to fundraise for World Vision. I lived in a World Vision refugee shelter for 6 months, so it's something that's very close to my heart. But we all remember those old ads that they were running 20 years ago, right? Of like kids covered in flies, distended stomachs, suffering, extreme suffering. And I think that donor centric fundraising has really thrived when it comes to the pain points, like the horror, the grotesqueness and the voyeurism, right? Community centric fundraising is the opposite. So it really focuses on telling stories with dignity, telling them in partnership with the person. So, like, what is that person's goal in sharing their story? And making sure that we're not setting them up to be exploited. So, like, not telling their story, crying in front of a donor, right? So that's basically an example. But community centric fundraising is a model that is grounded on social justice. That is the main goal. So instead of fundraising's main goal being raising money, it is changing the system. That being said, I've been a community centric fundraiser for a long time, and I definitely believe that community centric fundraising actually helps you raise more money because you are building deeper partnerships with your donors, and everyone wants to feel that sense of community, right? Not only that, you're educating them on the issues. So instead of just saying, like, oh, you feed people, as my kind of example throughout, which is a very palatable issue, you're talking about the systemic barriers and letting them understand more. And like, then what I usually like to do is provide additional resources for them to go look up. So I've sent donors to CCF's website, Community Centric Fundraising, their hub, so they can read other articles by fundraisers and how they've experienced the sector. I've invited them to sign on to petitions with us and to write for our blog so we can send it to the rest of our community. It's about building partnership rather than just getting the gift.
Yeah, and I know that there are, is it 10 principles that come with the CCF fundraising model? And can you talk about, we're obviously going to link to it in the show notes. If someone has reviewed this, they obviously agree with the 10 principles that they're like, we want to start having this shift within our organization and the way they fundraise. I know there are some letters on the website that help um, nonprofit fundraisers be able to communicate about CCF, but can you talk a little bit more about if a listener is like, yes, like I want to move towards this model, how did they start to have those conversations within their organization?
Well, I've actually published a piece on the CCF Hub about 9 ways to transition from donor centric to community centric fundraising. So I'll send that over to you if you want to include that in the show notes. But there's many ways. The first thing that I want to say though is that you don't need anyone's permission to become a community centric fundraiser, right? Like you can start telling stories with dignity. You can start baking consent into your storytelling process. You can start saying, we did this rather than you did this, right? So there's a lot of ways to start building those principles into your day to day work. Even like the way that you show recognition for someone's contribution, whether that's time or money, it could be just like a simple personalized video that you do for all your monthly donors, all your donors over 5 years. So just kind of like thinking it through a little bit differently. But the first thing that I would do is an audit. So, how are you currently telling stories? How are you currently fundraising? How are you currently engaging with your community, your partners, your donors? And how is that problematic when it comes to social justice lens? So, if you're asking people to share their stories and you're then sharing that without their permission to donors, that's not very CCF aligned, right? At least get their permission. If you have a gala and your cause is people experiencing homelessness, like I hope that you see some of that cognitive dissonance that happens for donors when they're paying $500 for a ticket at an event that is supporting people experiencing homelessness, right? So there's a lot of different ways to move away from that, and it'll be organization specific. So CCF actually has this audit guide that they have that I've used in the past with my own teams. And it really helped because one of the things that we were stuck on is through a CCF lens, social justice lens, we want to invest in people of color who are, usually disenfranchised or oppressed in various ways. So one of the things in the audit said, well, can you provide additional budget for your racialized fundraisers to attend more conferences because maybe they haven't been given those opportunities before. But at that organization that I was a director of development at, we couldn't. They were unionized. We couldn't provide additional supports for one fundraiser and not another. So just thinking through about how each principle can apply to different parts of your organization because it'll be unique to you and to your cause and to your service users.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And when we were off camera, I was telling you about how I was at a training and we were talking about, the donor is the hero of the story and how in CCF that has changed. And you mentioned from like the you to the we. Can you talk a little bit more? Because language matters and how we talk about each partner and each stakeholder that is a part of the organization and an integral part. Um, how do you begin to make those language shifts, or what does that even mean, that to shift from, the donor as the hero to a more community-centric approach?
Well, CCF believes one of the principles is that we all benefit from the work of social justice, that we all benefit by being involved in charity. So it's not just compassion, it's not just like empathy, like I get something out of it as a fundraiser or as a volunteer or as a donor, and that is valuable, right? And I think that a lot of nonprofits, they end up seeing like my work is not valuable. Like I'm just asking for money for nothing. And that's not the case. So that's why we end up positioning the donor as this like godlike figure that has so much like say and control because we undervalue our work so much. And I see this especially with corporate. So I think that one thing to do is, and I think I would like to tie it back to something that you said earlier about like how do you say no to your board chair, is like put yourself on an equal playing ground as everyone that you're talking to. Is your board chair that much smarter, that much faster, that much more experienced than you are? Probably not. You're probably an experienced person with a lot of thoughts who has done research and are not bringing nonsense to them, right? So why not treat yourself with the same level of reverence that you're giving to this donor? And I think that once you remove the power from your mentality, it makes it a lot easier to have these conversations as you would with a colleague or with a friend, which makes donors lean in because you're no longer treating them like a stranger. You're showing them your real self and you're sharing your values with them, which is what attracts people to you in the first place, right? Like we see this so heavily in corporate. They're leading with their values and it's paying off in spades, right? So for nonprofits to be kind of like wishy-washy or lukewarm, like it just is a detriment to you when you could be really owning that you bring a lot of value and treating people in the same way that you would want them to treat you.